Welcome this morning. We are here for helpful screens for school counselors and any other support staff that wants to learn about good student screens for helping students basically so this isn't, although it's called school counselor screens, it is great screens, great student screens for anyone that is working with students, helping students. So appreciate your attendance. I have a few people on the call with me today from the PowerSchool team. They'll be helping out monitor chat and whatnot, but we'll get to introductions in just a moment and we'll get started. Let's plan for about an hour. So we call this a power hour, and I'll get into more details about what that means and that sort of thing with length of time, but just want to kind of prepare you. So again, welcome. My name is Steven. I'm on the Meta PowerSchool team, and I have been on the team for roughly 6 years. And I am a former school counselor, which makes this this topic pretty relevant to my background. So I'm glad to be here. We have been doing a counselor skills training for several years in the fall. And what we decided to do, out of respect for the fact that you're all so busy within your district, is try to break these trainings up into smaller pieces or smaller chunks for you. It's really hard to get out of the school, we understand, mid-year, really any time of year, for a full day or even a half-day training. So we were trying to find a way to accommodate those that maybe were able to get on a virtual call for an hour or so, but not able to commit for a full day or a half day even. So welcome. So the goal again is that we're going to be on here for about 60 minutes, maybe an hour 15 is the goal. Admittedly, this is the first time I've ever done the training this way. I've done the material via the full day or 2-day counselor skills training, but this is the first time that we're doing it in a smaller set. Again, just kind of breaking it up. So we might go over that hour threshold. Understandably, if you have to get going at the hour mark, knowing that you had planned for an hour, understandable. We do have a new training survey we're going to share at the end. So if you could all fill that out at the end of the training, we would appreciate that. We'll get that in the chat later on. But I wanted to mention that now. Hopefully none of you have to leave early because we'd love your feedback on how these newer, different kind of trainings are going and if they're helpful for you, right? So we want to always improve. So without further ado, the first thing I'm going to do, I'm sharing my screen right now. And as you can see, I'm in a train environment which is Meta's scrambled data from different districts. So you won't see any student data, actual student data in my train environment. But for this training, you're going to be in your own environment. So I encourage you to go to the screens. Hopefully you have 2 screens. If not, that's okay. You can just view what we're doing over here. But if you do have 2 screens and you can follow along in your own environment while I'm going to the screens on mine, that would be the best way to experience this training. But what I wanted to show you first is our documentation. And we almost always start our trainings this way. But I think it's especially important because I see that I am talking to some users who we've never seen maybe on a training before, which is understandable because some of you are new to your position, some of you are new to your building, and some of you, again, school counselors specifically I'm talking to, maybe wouldn't come to the typical PowerSchool 101 or some of the other trainings. Maybe you're not a scheduler. Some of the team members, including myself on this call, are the very same people who work in scheduling. So if you are a scheduler, some of us will see you later this year as well. So I'm going to go show you our documentation, and the way to get there is in any of your environments, including mine. If you click on this PowerSchool Help menu, down to Meta Documentation, all of the training documents that we have, step sheets, agendas for trainings, PowerSchool documentation that we have found and pulled in that we thought was important, multiple topics represented here. And you can sort by any of these columns. You can see when the document was last updated. Now I will say we created this this online file cabinet, I'll call it, earlier this year. So probably the oldest date you'll see is February 27th, 2025. Just realize some of these documents have been around for years. but you will see any that have been updated since. But the really great way to use this file cabinet is that you can sort and filter by these areas. So I can click on any of these so that I can filter by these areas. And then another way to do it is to simply filter. By using this filter, I'm filtering, the filter is looking at the document name as well as all of these columns. So core area, subject, document type. So for example, prior to this year, we'd have a 2-day training called Counselor Skills. So if I type the words Counselor Skills, all of those will come up in the subject, but anything with the word counselor, counselor skills over here in the name is also going to come up. So today I'm just going to focus on showing you the agenda for today. And I'm going to scroll down, and if it's still a little too hard to find, you can see I still have 50 documents to look for. I'm just going to start typing the name of the training. So I'm going to type help as in helpful screens for school counselors. And when I click on this document, my browser's set up to just go ahead and download it. Yours might operate just a little bit differently on your own machine. But when I click the hyperlink on here, it does download it to my machine. So I'm going to click here to open it. And just a real quick review of what we're talking about today. So what I wanted to do for this training is just go through the most helpful screens for your working with students academically. And I have listed almost all of the screens we're going to talk about. Some we will buzz right through quickly. Some we'll spend a little bit more time on. And then at the end, I'm just going to talk about a handful of customizations. We'll talk about what customizations in PowerSchool means and which may be most helpful for your role. And so I'm going to close out of here, but this might be a good reference for you if you want to get a hold of that agenda this morning before we get started. Any questions diving in before we dive in? Any questions here? I'm not seeing anything, so I'm gonna go ahead and I also wanted to show you our YouTube channel. So this is Meta Training's YouTube content up here in the right corner of my screen off of the documentation. And we have recently revamped this just a little bit. We hid some older videos that may not any longer be relevant to you, and we have created some new playlists. So I can see what YouTube is recommending as our most quote unquote popular videos to watch. But I would recommend you go straight to the playlists over here. And for your purposes, the people in this room, PowerSchool trainings will be a good one. PowerSchool new user recommended and PowerHour trainings are probably the most relevant for the people in this room. And you will see some overlap. So there's not all entirely unique videos among the three of those categories. Some of them are in fact the same. We did a stored searches and stored selections PowerHour about 2 weeks ago, and that one is in probably all three of those, for example, but probably great for anybody here to use. So I'm going to put up a quick poll, and if you can help us out by answering that poll that pops up on your screen, we would appreciate that.
Stephen, do you also want them to sign in? I wasn't sure what we were going to do
Oh, right.
along
Thank
those
you, Kim.
lines. Yeah, you're
Yep.
welcome.
Yeah, if you can put your district and building name in the chat, we would appreciate that. So go ahead and answer that poll and then put your district and building name in the chat. We would appreciate that. That helps us to know where you're from, who we're talking to. All right, so mostly school counselors I'm seeing as the answers come in. We've had, let's see, 6 answers so far, 6 responses, and 5 out of 6 of them say school counselor. 1 is a district leader or support of multiple buildings. Thank you for putting that in the chat. We appreciate that. Right, 9 responses. Thank you. Almost, so 78% school counselors. You know what, Kim? I don't know how to display. I thought I could display those results so everybody can see them, but I'm not seeing that. So that's okay.
Let me see. I can work on that.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your responses. So we will move along here. If there's no questions moving forward, we're going to get right into it. So again, I'm working in a train environment, fake student data. You will see some funny names, some goofy names, because they're basically words all mashed together to make up fake names. So no student data present in our train environment. But again, we do ask that you're in your own environment, kind of exploring if you do have 2 screens and able to do so. Otherwise, you can keep an eye on our screen. So I'm going to start right from the top here. Actually, I lied. I'm going to skip kind of to the bottom. And this is one that I think most of you are aware of. I think every single one of our districts have this enabled. But I want to talk about the first customization again in the last category on your agenda, and that is the multi-select button. And the reason I want to start there is because I do want to get a selection of students so that I can demonstrate the different student screens around PowerSchool. So if you're not aware, multi-select is a great tool. And what it does for you is it allows you to, if you have a set of student numbers on a document or a spreadsheet, you can input them into multi-select and pull up that group of students. There are other ways to select students, groups of students, such as state ID, like SSID, internal student ID number, that's what that one means. So we don't use that nearly as much, sometimes in scheduling. So if you're not really familiar with that, don't worry too much about it. You can technically use last first name or first last name if that's the way you have it on your spreadsheet, but I will say that's not the best use of multi-select, simply because if you have a letter off or a spacing or something, it might have trouble picking that up. So I say if you have the student number, that is going to be your best bet to get the right set of students into your selection. So I do have an export of students that I pulled yesterday. And this is my export. So let's say we have among our team in our school building, we have an export of students. Anytime I export a group of students, I pull their student number first. I always do because of this very fact, because if I want to input that group of students back into PowerSchool and utilize them for a search or look at information about them, I can copy off of that spreadsheet. I can paste that in here, and I am going to get those exact students in my selection. So I click search. I do have include inactive students on that checkbox there, just in case any of them have left and I'm not aware of it, but those are the kids on my spreadsheet here. Now I have my students starting with Ms. Acoustic here is the first one on my list, just like it was on my spreadsheet, all the way down to Thunder Soul. So these are my 17 students I want to work with. And I'm going to touch on this very quickly, but not spend any time on it besides that. But if you wanted to store this group of students, this very specific group of students, that's something we covered 2 weeks ago in the stored searches and stored selections. So if I wanted to store this group of kids to use at a future date, I could go to stored selections, leave it set to save up here, and I could simply click submit. And that's what I already did yesterday, and that's why I have this group. I have those same 17 kids there saved for me as a user to come back to anytime, and I can select that group of kids anytime. So just a quick tip, I'm not going to spend any more time on this because again, we have a full power hour on that subject. So just wanted to make you aware though, if you're not aware of how to use either stored searches or stored selections. I can't encourage you enough. It's about an hour, 5-minute video. Go back and watch that, and we'll go through several examples for you. Okay, so now that I have my, is there anybody here who didn't know that this functionality existed? So I'm going to go ahead and let's see, pop this poll in the chat here, and let me know if a checkbox if you knew that existed, and an X if you didn't know multi-select existed. Okay, everybody who's responded, oh, no, there's a few that, okay. So out of 10 responses, 7 knew that existed and 3 did not. Well, that's great. We're already learned. So a few of you have already learned something today. I love that. Okay, so utilize multi-select. I can't advertise that one enough. Again, all of our districts have access to that, but it's technically a customization. Customization meaning it's not out of the box PowerSchool. It's not created by PowerSchool. It's created by a developer who added that to PowerSchool. So that's just a quick definition of customization in PowerSchool. All right, moving on. So I'm going to use my example student, and we are just going to go through some student screens now. Appreciate your responses there. So I'm going to mostly use this first student. You can use any of the students in your district or your building. And note that our train environment was last refreshed with fake student data, academic data, in the summertime before school started. So we are going to start in quick lookup screen, but notice that I don't have any grades out of the grade book for students currently. So I'm going to flip back a year. If I want to look at last year's student data that may be different than this year's, I can flip back a year. And maybe not with this student, not so much data, but that's okay. I've got a little bit. So I'm going to look at Beryl's data, her course data from last year right now. So she is currently a senior. I can see that. That won't change up here, but I can see what she was doing in her junior year. So when she was taking painting and algebra 2 and whatnot, chemistry, and we can see what her grades were. So I am going to start here on the quick lookup screen. The quick lookup screen is going to give you current grades out of the grade book in the current term. So we're currently in Q1, and regardless of when grades are stored in October, presumably, I assume that most of your districts end Q1 in October. When those grades are stored, this grade here that appears on the screen will still only reflect what's coming out of the grade book. So just keep that in mind. The reason I say that, and it doesn't happen a lot, but sometimes teachers will update their grades after grades are stored. So there is a difference in PowerSchool between stored grades and out of the grade book or current grades. This is showing current grades or out of the grade book grades. All right, so that's what we're seeing here. Also, in my humble opinion, not nearly as useful down here, but there is a place for attendance, and I'm going to tell you why I make that statement on this particular screen. If you use meeting attendance, which I know a lot of you do, this is calculating all of those meeting attendance instances of absences that's taken on that student. So was this student really absent 17 days? Maybe. But if you're taking meeting attendance, it's also counting those as instances of absences. So really, if I look at her hours for the whole year, she missed only 11 hours total of school. So that's about a day and a half. Oh, never mind. I was a little bit off there. She did miss, okay, 74 hours is what she missed total per year. I apologize. So I'm looking over here. So there is some useful information here on the screen. But these numbers, if you're simply looking at numbers, they may not be quite accurate for you. But your House Bill 410 attendance hours would get you closer to what she actually missed in school. Besides the grades and attendance, you also have the option to display a grade point average. So if you are a middle or high school, I know most of you are here, if not all of you, you may want to display a grade point average. And this is pulling whichever grade point average calculation that your school has decided to display here. So your school can choose which GPA to display. Do you want to display the Y1 current? See, I could see it's a current calculation, it's Y1. Do you want to display Q1 current? Do you want to display a cumulative GPA per student? That's up to the building to decide. Now, I do want to show you where that's at while we're here on this page.
Stephen, there's a question in the
Mhm.
chat asking about current grades versus stored grades. And so the question is, why is this true? The current grades are seen even after grades are stored. Also, when grades are pulled for the transcript, are they pulled from this current grade?
Great question. Thanks, Meredith. So they there's two different grades in PowerSchool essentially. There's current grades, which are right out of the grade book, and stored grades. Just a quick definition of stored grades. Stored grades are in that moment when I hit store for that term, it's making basically a carbon copy of everything that's in the grade book for the courses and the students or the grade level of students that I select. It's taking that and moving those over or making a copy of them into the stored grades table. So it's a completely different data table in PowerSchool that it's taking out of the grade book. So that's why they're different, because current grades are out of the grade book, ever changing, right? If a teacher, if I'm in 25, 26, and I'm not right now, but I'll hop back over there. Again, I don't have any Q1 grade data so in either, so it's not super helpful. But if Mr. Cloudkeeper, who teaches AP Bio, put in a grade, this student Beryl earned a B today on her AP Bio test. This letter grade would reflect how she's doing in that moment. And then if she didn't turn in her homework and he entered an F for that homework or a 0, this grade would then update in real time immediately. So you're seeing the results of Mr. Cloudkeeper's grade book in this screen right here. Now, important to note, something I haven't said yet, and some of you know and some of you may not be aware, but quick lookup screen in the admin portal where we're looking is also known as the grades and attendance screen in the public portal. That's incredibly important to you because this is the same screen, essentially, that students and parents can view in their public portal. So when Mr. Cloudkeeper puts in a new grade, they can see the immediate results of that new grade. In fact, my children are currently enrolled in school, and I can log into PowerSchool as a parent in the public portal, and I can see their grades as soon as that teacher, puts in a new grade. In fact, some of my family members, even including my child, even have notifications set up on the app, and they get notifications to let them know when their teacher has updated their grade. But this will be reflective of whatever's in that grade book. Historical grades is different because when I store the grades for the quarter, let's say October 20th, it's going to pull whatever is here, or if there's no grades entered, it will just be blank, which does happen. So if for some reason, maybe this Delhi course is just kind of a holding course, a fake course, or whatever you want to call it for attendance purposes. If there's no grade to pull, it'll just pull over as blank to the stored grades table. All right, and we will talk more about stored grades further in the training, but I wanted to answer that question. That's a great question about what is the difference. So an admin user can restore grades. So for whomever is responsible for storing grades per term, That is a possibility. So for example, I store grades on October 20th, and then I realized that all my teachers had until the 23rd, Monday the 23rd, to finish their grades. And several of them, and I don't know who, have made changes to their Q1 grades. Now I have to restore. That is a possibility. It's a little bit more work, I will say, on the admin user. So we would prefer to only store once per term, but it does happen, and it is possible to restore over top of the store for that term. Hopefully that helps. Any other questions regarding stored versus current grades?
Hi, this is Kirsten from Charlie Rivers. I asked the original question.
Mm-hmm.
So when grades are pulled for the transcript, are they pulled from this current grade or are they pulled from the stored grade?
Stored grades. Stored grades
Okay.
only. Yep.
All right, awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Thank you for the questions. Always appreciate your questions. Usually part of my spiel at the beginning of these trainings is please ask your questions in the chat or take yourself off mute. Either way is great. But I do encourage that. We all do encourage that. And I just realized I forgot to introduce our team. So I will go through that real quick. So here from the PowerSchool team, again, I'm Stephen from the PowerSchool and PowerScheduler team. I have Kim Anderson and Meredith Reagan helping me out. And then also from our team, Stephanie Weitzel and Margie Lee are here all helping out. So thank you all for attending and being a part of this training. All right. Anything else about Quick Lookup that we want to cover before we move on? There are other tabs at the top. Almost always when you come to this screen, you're going to be focused on the initial tab here for Quick Lookup, which again, student attendance and grades, maybe just looking at a list of courses and the GPA. Before we move on, I did want to show you where this is populating from. So I'm going to hop over to the GPA for student screens. And I love this new PowerSchool search that came out a year ago, usually when it works. I love it. Got to get it exactly right. There we go. GPA info. I forgot that info word for student screens, but I do love this search. If I know the name of the page exactly that I'm looking for, I can pull it up that way. I don't have to go back out through the menu. So I'm going to click here. And this is one of the 2 times during this session I'm going to come to this page here. I just wanted to show you at this moment which is populating there. So it looks like they have set in this train environment to DCS Cumulative, and I could change it to their, there's different calculations they have. It's really important to get familiar with the calculations that you have in your district, which you are using for your building, if any. If you're elementary, you might not be using them at all. If you're middle school, you also might not be using them. But if you are running honor roll, you are using at least a quarterly GPA to help you calculate that, most likely, depending on how your honor roll is set up. So you have current, you have different term-specific GPAs in here. They have GPAs set up for eligibility that might look a little bit different, that sort of thing. So currently they have DCS Cumulative set up. So what we are seeing for our student Beryl is her cumulative GPA. And something that's caused a point of confusion, go back to her Quick Lookup, is the fact that it says, let's see, it says current here, but this is actually the DCS Cumulative GPA calculation that's being used. And that threw me off admittedly earlier as well when I said current. They currently have a cum GPA that they're using. Questions about that? There are so many screens among the student screens to explore. We can't possibly cover them all in an hour. So therefore, I'm just going to pop through a couple of these. I'm going to talk about Counselor Dashboard very briefly. because Counselor Dashboard is another one of those, what we call customizations. In this customization in particular, basically links to all of these different academic screens or several of these academic screens. So it's just taking in a tile kind of format, it's taking multiple student screens and putting them on one screen. So again, Counselor Dashboard is simply a customization that's combined several of our student screens, mostly the academic aspects. Quick lookup you'll see again in some of the other screens that we're going to talk about in the next half hour to an hour. So just wanted to touch on that. So that's what Counselor Dashboard, that's what you'll find at Counselor Dashboard. Okay, the Modify Info screen. There's a couple of reasons that you might be interested in this screen here. Keep in mind while I'm going through these screens that we are looking at, again, fake student data. I know I've said it a few times, but I always think that reminders are important because you'll see some things that may look out of whack or may look a little bit different than what you'd expect. So I just want to point that out. Couple of things here. This piece of information here is old news, I'll just call that. We don't use those grad requirement sets. I will talk about them in this hour, but we don't use these old ones anymore. So if I click down here, you'll see some old information. So we don't worry about that here. Some of our districts and buildings track homeroom and homeroom teacher and update them each year. Some of our districts track locker information right here in PowerSchool. And there is a way to utilize the screen, individually or import that information. A lot of these fields, so static student fields or data on students can be imported in mass. It's a little bit of a tricky thing. Not everybody in each school district does that, but there are people in your district that know how to do that if and when needed. For example, locker numbers. If you had a spreadsheet of all student numbers, and their locker numbers, you could technically import that into PowerSchool for those students, and then all their locker numbers would populate here in this blank. Now, some of you are using what we call a third-party vendor to track things like lockers, so you may not have a need for that. So if yours is blank, you either don't track lockers in PowerSchool, and maybe you're using lockers, a different kind of system to track your lockers. I'm going to skip a lot of these. A lot of these are things that aren't used by the majority of our buildings, if any. Some of our districts do use teams or houses for categorizing groups of students, namely scheduling students into places. So that's what that's for. Some of our districts use tracks. Attendance tracks is what that pertains to. So for example, your seniors may go to school for less days than the rest of your students, and therefore they may be on a different attendance track. So they may be, say, track B that doesn't attend school the last 3 days of the year, whereas maybe everyone else in the district is on track A, except for maybe, kindergartners are on track C because there's a couple of days at the beginning they don't attend. So this track is important to the calendar. Again, another thing that some of our buildings don't use, but some of our buildings are using for different attendances for different groups of students or grade levels. If you needed to know which is the first date the student ever attended your district, this would be the place to find out, or which date they started attending your school, this is the place that you'd find out, and which grade level they started attending that school. Mainly for this group, what I wanted to point out is there's functionality here in PowerSchool that will allow you to assign a counselor or multiple counselors to a student. This can be done in mass or individually. So let's say that Beryl is a new student and you needed to assign her to her counselor. You could click into here and you could select that counselor. You could say select, and that's the primary. No longer is it Soprano, it is now Sunstrider as her counselor. Sorry for the strange names, but again, fake data. So I can assign her to Sunstrider, and I can actually There we go. Remove her off of soprano. There we go. So now that's her counselor. This can be done in mass. So if you're not currently using this way of categorizing students and you have multiple counselors in your building and you want to, you can grab a selection of students, however it is that you put a student selection into PowerSchool, and you can do a mass update. And I can show you how to do that. So I'm going to submit so I can change Beryl's counselor to Sunstrider. And anytime I click back to student search, it does take me back to the start page. And this down here, which I'm not going to talk about a whole lot in this hour, but it's called the group actions menu. So I won't be using this much, but I did want to show you that under student administration, there is a mass assigned counselor. So I have my 17 students here. I click on mass assigned counselor, and I can select which counselor I need them all to be with. So in this case, maybe it's Sunstrider, that is all of their counselor. I have some options, some logic down here. I can assign this counselor to students. I can replace the existing counselor. I can assign as their primary, or I can assign as their secondary. So I will assign as their primary. And I save that. And now they're all designated under Sunstrider as their counselor. Now, I'm not going to go any further with this today, but I do want you to know how, in a nutshell, how these staff members were identified as counselors. You may be currently on this screen in your own district thinking, I don't see any counselors, or I don't see my name on here. So this is designated through security roles. So if your name isn't on here or your counselors aren't all identified on this list, you want to talk to your district leader about getting them on that list. And for just my district leaders that are here today, that's identified within security roles. So they have to be in a security role that's noted as a counselor. And so if you're not sure how to do that, please put in a case and we can teach you how to do that. All right, so how many of you are currently using that functionality of assigning counselors to students in your district? So I just popped another poll into the chat there. If you give me a thumbs up if you're using it, thumbs down if you're currently not. That would be great for us to know who's using it. Okay, 6 districts represented, or schools are not using it, or 5, I'm sorry, 5 are not, 1 is. All right, yeah, not all of our districts use this. May be beneficial to you, may not be. While we're looking at those results there, I'm gonna go back to Beryl, and I do wanna point something out up here. This is the student line customization. That's something that I said in the agenda that we would cover, but I'm just gonna touch on it quickly now. And all of this information is customizable within a school building. Again, almost always determined by your district leader. So you want to talk to them if you have any suggestions or requests. But that is a decision that's made more at a district level. And I have currently displaying counselor on the student line and homeroom teacher on the student line, as well as the username. So if a student comes in and says, I can't get into my public portal account, you have their username at the ready right here. That's not as common. I don't see that a lot. But more commonly, you would see like date of birth, grade, student number, which building they're in. So those are most common on the student line. But the student line, we have a customization to add on the student line what we call DAT codes, or information that we can pull from various places around PowerSchool to put things here, such as homeroom teacher. So there's a code to look at, say, their first period teacher, and just list the teacher's name here, or counselor code, which is, again, looking at whatever is noted here on that student. I think there's something in the chat. Oh, okay. I see someone in the chat said they only voted no because they're elementary and they only have one counselor. Understandable. You probably don't need to identify who the counselor is, right? Okay, one counselor per building. Yep, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, I wouldn't expect you to be using that. That would not be worth your time to have that. So, all right. Thank you for the feedback. Really appreciate that. Any questions about mass assigning counselors or single assign counselor to a student or anything like that? All right. I'm going to click over to other info, the next one on the list under student profile. And this is another one I'm not going to spend much time on. I just wanted to point out a couple of examples of ways you could use this page. You may have never even looked at this page. You may have never had a reason, but just a couple of reasons you might want to utilize it. If the students have various alerts on them, so an alert to identify something is important for you and or the teachers to know, your secretaries, your principal, whomever's looking in PowerSchool for this information. So I gave a couple of examples. So an other alert. Maybe there's somebody in this student's life that should not be picking up the student. Maybe they used to be identified as a contact, but they just really wanted an indicator to say like this person can no longer pick up this student. Attendance alert, this student's on an attendance plan, maybe at risk alert, attendance and graduation risk. So just various places to document things about a student that you might want everyone to be aware of. This is also a place, this is a bit of new functionality in this past year that you can hide a report card for a specific student, for an individual student. And the most common reason I can think of to do that would be someone who owes fees. I know that, in the days, and a lot of you might still do this, but in the days when we would hand out paper report cards, which I know a lot of schools are moving a bit away from, but in the days we'd hand out paper report cards, we would say, oh, you can't have your report card yet because you still owe fees, class fees or athletic fees. And so you have to take care of that before you get your report card. So you can hide their current year report card from the public portal, and you can even put a message on why that's hidden. So use sparingly, obviously, that's a district or school building decision. So that is up to your, again, the philosophy of your school district and building to decide on whether you're using that and what you're using it for. All right. Any questions about the alerts? Some of those alerts will appear as icons up here. So other alert, stepmom, former stepmom cannot pick up, never expires, right? Let's see, what else do we have? Fee balance alert, that sort of thing. So some of the alerts will appear as icons up here. Questions about that screen here? All right, we're gonna hop on down to academic records. And I'm gonna start right from the top with cumulative info. Cumulative info is a customizable screen. Now you saw it earlier where the setup lies for which information you want to show here. You can display none of this, all of this, or different numbers that you want to display here. In this building's case, they have individual grade point average, current grade point average being pulled from the grade book. Again, I'm in 25-26, and Beryl doesn't have any grades in the grade book for her classes yet, which is why there's nothing populating here. But once she does have grades, they'll start populating GPAs here if it's set to current. Her cumulative GPA is here. They also have an unweighted GPA calculation, and then it does show her class rank. A quick note about class rank for my high school folks. Class rank has to be recalculated when grades are stored. So if I know it's currently the beginning of the school year, you're probably thinking about seniors a whole lot because they're going to be graduating in, I don't know, roughly 7 or 8 months. And if class rank is something that you look at in your building, then you do want to rerun the class rank. So if you're not sure how to do that, talk to your district leader. If your district leader is not aware, they can put in a case to learn how to rerun your class rank. Because often we get the question at the beginning of the school year, I don't think my class rank is accurate, but you do need to rerun it manually potentially. Some of your buildings do have it set up to rerun every time, every day, or every time grades are stored. So you may be good actually, now that I think about it. But if yours is set up as manual, then you may need to run it after grades are stored. But you can automate it to an extent as well. This building chooses to have total credits earned for high school credits, and then per grade level. So there is a data access tag code. That's what it's called in PowerSchool. Basically, a code you can put in to find information from various places. And it's just pulling the amount of earned credits for the student per grade level. And again, I'm going to show you where these calculations are. So back to where I mentioned earlier, GPA info for student screens. That's where you'll find these calculations. Again, you don't have to use these. You could get rid of them all if this isn't serving your building a purpose. If it's not good for your building, you don't have to use them. But a lot of our high schools especially like it, and some of our middle schools like to show these term GPAs. Now this one you can see is set for the stored grade. It's coming from the stored, whereas some of them are current. So current GPA, whatever's in the grade book for this current term, versus once Q1 grades are stored, they'll have a GPA there. Cumulative GPA, cumulative unweighted, class rank code, the credit hours code, earned credit hours, and then earned credit hours per grade level. If this is a good point in the training to mention, if you're maybe feeling a little bit lost in a screen like this and wondering, well, I don't think I'll ever remember how to set that up, and we don't currently have that set up, or it's not set up the way maybe our team wants it, you can request access to our Train 01 environment. Talk to your district leader if they put in a case for you with the PowerSchool team. We can give you a temporary username and password for an amount of time, and you can log in here and you can use it to view this information. We don't mind doing that. This Train database is open to our users in our individual school districts, so no worries there. If you want access, make yourself a note, ask your district leader, and they can put in a case, and we'll send over a username and a password for you to get in. So now I'm throwing a lot at you right now. All right, let's go back to our student, our example kid. And this is her cumulative info page. This is another page that does display in the public portal. So keep this in mind. If this information is not accurate, we do take cases for this sometimes where, hey, you know, I'm new to the building, or I'm the new district leader, and this information is not accurate. You might just want to blank out these calculations for now so that they're not seeing inaccurate data. Nobody wants to show parents and students inaccurate data about their academics. That's not really fair. So yeah, so keep that in mind. If you need to blank them out for now and then rebuild, recreate at a later date, that's fine. Before you go blanking anything out, talk to your district leader, by the way. All right, questions there. So we are moving right along. Next one, this is going to be a quick touch, real quick. Honor roll, I'm going to go to the next student as my example. No, that's not a good one to use. There we go. That's a great one to use. So Maple has been on the honor roll throughout his academic career for many years and in many different terms. This page will simply list every time the student has been on the honor roll. Similarly to class rank, honor roll does need to be calculated after grades are stored. So grades are stored, run the honor roll calculation. The honor roll calculation is programmed however your school building has set that up, and that's how these levels are determined. So in the building I used to work in when I was a school counselor a few years ago, we had an honor roll, a merit roll, and a principals list. The merit roll was a 3.0 or above. The honor roll was a 3.5 or above, and the principals list was a 4.0. So students, only if they had all A's, could be on the principals list, right? So there's different levels that can be determined, and that's what this level is here. The honor roll method is that whatever that calculation is called. So this building has had each of the buildings, like their middle school versus their high school, they just call their calculation something different based upon the building that they're in. And then it gives you the store code that it used to determine the term code or store code it used to determine whether that student was on the honor roll. And if you wanted more information about that student's earning the honor roll, you could simply click into the level met, and it'll give you a little bit more information about that, including the grade point average for that term that was used to determine that. And sometimes this is useful. You can see when that calculation was run. You may or may not ever use that, but that's really all I wanted to say about honor roll. We do have an honor roll power hour coming up in October. How to set up the honor roll, how to run or calculate the honor roll, how to run an honor roll list of students. And so if that's your role, if that's part of your role in your building or your district, we encourage you to attend. That's already on our calendar for October on a Tuesday at 10 a.m. I can't remember which Tuesday, but it is on our calendar. All right. Moving right along. And this is another real quick touch here. Student dashboard is another one of those screens, but this is from core PowerSchool that collects data from multiple screens around PowerSchool. So current grades and attendance summary. This is just a kind of a quick hit, if you want to call it that, of looking at information about your students. Let's see, assignment list. So presumably that would be their assignments for a certain quarter. But again, this is not going to be up-to-date data with, this student doesn't have any assignments yet for this year. Historical grades, so it's just pulling the information from that historical grade screen here. Student schedule, so all enrollments, we'll talk about that page. Their cumulative info we've already talked about, and their student test scores. So again, just a page in PowerSchool that it's pulling multiple things onto the same page. Historical course grades. We had a related question about this one earlier, so there's a few things I wanted to say here. There is a lot of information, a lot of valuable information. Thank you, Stephanie. Stephanie just put in the chat when that honor roll power hour is. It's coming, or I'm sorry, the GPA's power hour is going to be in 2 weeks, and probably the honor roll power hour 2 weeks after that. Thank you. All right. So this screen gives you a lot of information. On the regular view, I'll call it, you have the year or the semester, basically the term that grade was stored, the course number, course name, department, if you use departments. Some of our buildings don't, and most of our buildings don't, and there's a reason we don't really recommend it. Some of you will find it useful and some of you won't. The course credit type versus stored grade credit type. This is an important distinction sometimes, because the course credit type is saying this course number here, what is the credit type on that course number? Then the stored credit type is whatever was stored from that course. So example, it doesn't happen a whole lot, but it does happen. If your district decided to change the credit type for this calculus class, if they updated it to some different identifier, this would change, this would not, because this, again, it was a place and time. It was what this course number had as a credit type when this grade was stored only, when these grades were stored only. All right, so usually they'll be the same. Sometimes they will be different if your credit types have changed, which it does happen. Amount of credit that was earned. So in the middle school, you're probably not seeing a whole lot of that, but in the high school, you should be seeing a whole lot of that. It will reflect if the student attempted the course but didn't earn the credit, of course. And then with each stored grade, you can click in to the stored grade and look at a lot more details about it. So including when it was stored or entered. So that's when that grade is stored. Anything below this blue line is state reportable information. I do not recommend changing any information here unless you're in communication with your district leader and or your EMIS coordinator. But again, usually you're not coming in here and changing historic grades anyway or updating. Occasionally you will need to though. So for example, you find out in May that back in January, a grade was stored wrong and a teacher, approaches you and says, hey, this student really should have had this grade this way. Not the B they had, but an A. If any of that's happening, I just recommend that you document it and you have that teacher sign something to say that's why you're changing it. Because whomever comes in here and changes a grade, it will list your user ID number and when that was done. I just recommend that you have documentation if you're changing grades. All right, couple more things about this page. I love the filters. I could, look at only the student's 9th grade grades if I wanted to. That's fantastic. I can look for a specific course. I need to look at their French 1 grade and I didn't want to, sift through. Go to French 1. Okay, now I can see her French 1 grade. If you use departments, you could filter that way, credit types. I could look at, let's see, I don't think that's going to work real well. Yep, I guess it will. So 0.0, so anything that they have here they did not earn credit for, maybe to double check, versus something they did earn credit for. I could also filter for certain types of grades every time they had an A, that sort of thing. Detail view is going to get you a little bit more information on this page. Earned versus potential credit is a big one. We get a lot of questions about that. Whether it's excluded from GPA, class rank, honor roll, and transcripts, that's determined on the course itself. So some of these classes are excluded from some of these. Let me go back to the normal view here. Previous school names. I made this mistake when I was a school counselor, but sometimes you have to enter transfer grades manually from somewhere else. I get a junior and I need to enter all their freshman and sophomore grades into PowerSchool here in historical grades. But I accidentally entered my own school building name. I can come here and I can quickly update that. That was actually from Meta High School. That was from Meta High School. And that is a quick, easy way to make that change if you've made that mistake. The only other thing I want to touch on here is that you can enter a single new grade. So if a student, took a summer course in another building and you need to enter that in here, you could do a single new entry. You can also do a multiple You could do multiple new entries, which is just going to give you, several columns per store code. So if you were entering their quarter 1, 2, 3, 4, semester Y1, all the values for that information, and several classes, for example. So again, usually we're talking transfer grades. Here's a tip about CCP classes. So some of you have, actually, if you're in a high school, I know that you have students taking CCP classes. I do recommend, you should have the CCP classes on their schedule, and I do recommend that you have CCP classes set to store grades, even if the classes don't take place in your building, because then what you'll get is what you're seeing here for, say, environmental science. I'll use as an example. You're going to get a blank. And what that means is once the grades are stored, there was no environmental science grade in a grade book for S1, but I did get the grade from Columbus State. So I can go in here and I can just pop that grade in there with the GPA points, earned credit, and done. So much easier than entering a whole new grade. I was just using that as an example. I know that I now have 2 credits for environmental, but I think you get the gist. So you can delete grades. I would not at all recommend that you go in here and start deleting anything, blanks or otherwise, because there may be a reason that exists there. Questions about historical grades? I think I hit on everything that I wanted to there. All right, I'm not seeing anything in the chat. So we're gonna move on down here. Just a couple of quick things here. Missing assignments. I know some school counselors will utilize this here, and I'm just gonna go back to a former year, get some information in there. So for quarter 1, this is the assignment that this student was missing in quarter 1. Again, I'm in last year's now to look at this data. I go to quarter 2, and they missed that, which looks to be the same one. Probably their dates are a little bit off here. So let's go to quarter 4. It looks like that's accurate. So this student missed all of these assignments in quarter 4. This is a good conversation starter with a parent and or student, right? I know I have conferences for my child tonight. And if, if we are able to see that information, that would be helpful. But hopefully, if a teacher or counselor is able to see that information about a student, they can have a little talk with my child as well, if that was the case. So good information to have. Missing assignments, and then, okay, a little bit about test results. There are 2 pages for student test results in the student screens of PowerSchool. I want to talk about the difference between state assessments and test results. State assessments is pulling from your state reportable data. Therefore, you will find Ohio State tests or OSTs, end of course exams for high school, we call them EOCs or end of course. College tests such as ACT or SAT are all reflected here, because as a school district, any public school or any school in Ohio that reports to the state of Ohio has to report their state test scores, including college aptitude tests. So that's where you'll find all this information. And the reason I point out the difference, that's a nice new screen that was developed in the last 2 years. The reason I point out the difference is that some of our districts use test results to track some of those very same tests, but sometimes others. I know we just had a request for one district to import all their MAP scores, for example. So we're in the process of importing like MAP scores or iReady scores or PSAT scores. Also ACT, SAT, you'll see this OCBA, that's what, OSTs were formerly called. So This is just another place to track tests. If you're seeing a blank page or much less data here, that's okay. Your district may not be tracking tests that way. So that is completely up to your district to utilize this screen or not. There is a process for getting those scores imported for you, and we help out on that end. So your district leader puts in a case, and we import those test scores to display on the test results screen. But again, for the purposes of those state reportable test scores, you will find them here on this page. Questions about test results? All right, GPA validation. This is a popular one for high school. And in my opinion, an underutilized screen. It's very valuable, but not used enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my school's GPA calculation. Let's say I work at Meta High School. I'm the school counselor, and I'm working with, and I'm actually going to go back to our original student here. She has some good data, I think, on her. And I am going to select the GPA that we use for the cumulative GPA to determine honors and maybe class rank and things like that. Maybe who's valedictorian, who's salutatorian, all of those important things for a senior. So I'm going to select the GPA calculation that we're using. And at the top, there's a few things here that might not make sense to you. Don't worry too much about the formula. What's important is that you have selected the GPA calculation that you use, what her grade point average is as a result, whether it's cumulative or current. This information is pulling from your district office level GPA calculation setups. So that's where this information is pulling from. All right, so you can't adjust it from here, and you wouldn't want to. So it's giving you the sum of all GPA points. If there's added value, so some of you use added value, most of you don't. And the sum of all earned credits that count into the GPA. It also tells you which terms are included in this GPA calculation, because within a GPA, you can tell it which terms are included. So for a cumulative, obviously you'd have usually an S1, S2, and a Y1 in the calculation. You'd have grade levels telling it which grade level should calculate. This is important because if my student took an Algebra 1 class in the 8th grade, the way this GPA is set up, it wouldn't count her Algebra 1 class because she took it in the 8th grade. So this is an important detail to pay attention to. This screen is super important to double check to make sure your GPAs are calculating correctly, and maybe start asking questions if they're not. All right, because you know your parents and students will. Also a good resource, speaking of parents and students, to be able to, after you've reviewed it, to meet with a parent or student and show them how exactly their GPA is calculated. It'll show you down here which grades are included in the GPA versus grades that have been stored. By the way, this is all stored grades if it's a cumulative GPA. Cumulative only looks at the stored. So which grades are included in the GPA versus which grades are excluded from the GPA. And it'll actually show you in red why it's excluded. So above, it showed that the terms were only Y1 and M1. Therefore, nothing in an S1 or basically a semesterly or quarterly term will be calculated in that GPA. Also, if the stored grade is set to exclude from GPA, that's why that'll show in red as well. And that's why it's also showing down here. So this will help you find issues with stored grades or GPAs. Sometimes I entered a stored grade wrong, transfer grades, for example, or summer school grade. And a student would say, I think my GPA should be a 3.1 and not a 2.9. And I'd come over here and look at it and say, you know what? You're right. This was maybe set to exclude when it shouldn't have been. Or maybe the grade points were entered wrong. Maybe I put in a B+, but I put in a 0 for the grade points manually. That would be bad, but it does happen. Or maybe the GPA is just not set up correctly. Maybe this GPA should include the 8th grade and semester length terms. Or maybe I'm using the wrong GPA. Questions about the GPA validation? All right. We're going to skip down to courses and programs. I want to show you this course registration screen. This used to be called All Enrollments, and in fact, still has that title at the top, but in the menu, it's now called Course Registrations. And you have a list of every course section that the student has been enrolled in for this school year, right? So for this school year, everything they had been enrolled in or are currently enrolled in. And it'll show you in red if they've been dropped from that course and who they've been dropped by. So it's a valuable page if you're looking at it for that information. I do want to point out that you do not change schedules from this page. This is simply a reference for which classes the student is in or has been in as of which dates. So it does have their enrollment start and exit dates on each. Scheduling settings. This is how the system knows how or if to schedule a student for next school year, which grade they're going into next. A grade 12 technically should be set to a 99. You don't have to do this individually on each student. There is a mass update function that we're not going to cover today. But just know that there's a mass update for all of these fields. You do want your seniors pointed to the grad building at some, eventually. So that's probably taken care of later in the year, usually by your district leader. You do want to have a year of graduation on every student. So sometimes when new kids move into your district or enter your building, this is an often forgotten screen. So if you know of a new student, you might want to take a peek at his or her scheduling settings page found in courses and programs and make sure this information is filled in. Especially if you are using Power Scheduler and this student is coming back to you next year, you do want them set to your school for the next year with a grad year, set to schedule with a priority and a next year grade. So go ahead and save that. All right, couple of quick things about post-secondary readiness. There are several pages that sound a lot alike here, so I'm going to give a quick definition of each. Graduation plan progress is a way to track your graduation requirements locally. And what I mean is, these are not necessarily state requirements. They do take state requirements into consideration, but this is a way to set up your own graduation plan. That's done at the district office level. We do have a video on our YouTube channel called Grad Planner and Grad Pathways that shows how to set up a graduation plan progress, basically graduation requirement. Students can have more than one. So they might have a regular diploma plan and they might have an honors diploma plan, but your district has to have that set up. And after you've watched that video on your YouTube channel, if you're interested in asking questions or need more information, you can talk to your district leader and have them put in a case if they're not sure how to help. Because we do recommend using this. Some of our buildings are using this graduation planner and some are not, but it's a great tool. So I can see which English classes this student has taken to fulfill their English requirement, for example, comparatively to maybe their financial literacy, which they're currently enrolled in, but have not completed yet. So I see that enrolled, right? I can program this to take testing into consideration. So they have not met the testing requirement for the state tests, and they have not taken their ACT or SAT either. Graduation plan selection. is the way to determine which plan the student is on. So as I mentioned, I can add a second plan to a student. So let's see. I'm not going to add one today because these historic plans I don't recommend using anymore. There are schools that were still using these historic plans up until recently, and therefore that's why they're still appearing here. But if I use that one and I submit, now this student has an academic honors diploma plan and a permanent graduation requirements plan. So I can monitor both ways to make sure that they are going to graduate and if they're going to graduate with honors. I'm going to skip graduation progress because that is the old historic graduation planner. So I know the names are very similar. It gets very confusing. Grad plan progress, grad plan selection are the first two. Those are the ones you're using to track local requirements. You're skipping that third one. And then the Grad Pathways looks at state requirements only. This was something that was created by our state reporting team. And it's just another way to show which classes they've fulfilled the different requirements with, if they've fulfilled their testing requirement, graduation seals, and other information as well, like industry credentials. Let's see, this person didn't take any of those, and you can use counselor notes down here if you need to. Since we are running short on time, I'm going to glaze over this last one here. The Ohio graduation worksheet form is a way to work with a student or a parent on plans for after high school. This was developed by our team a few years back, so it is a customization. It is a screen that's specific to Meta Solutions customers for just tracking different things that weren't tracked anywhere else in PowerSchool. And then to skip down a bit, once you've entered that information, if you're using that, if you go to the More menu and Custom Reports, you can use this form here, this Ohio graduation worksheet. And that information that I entered for that student appears here, as well as other information pulled from other places around PowerSchool, namely the state requirements. So that's where this other information is coming from. So again, some of this information I entered, like Mary Smith as her pre-apprenticeship contact, whereas these test scores were pulled from other places around PowerSchool. Might be one more helpful resource for you. All right, winding down here. The other custom report I wanted to show you under the More custom reports is hopefully something you've seen and hopefully something you use. If you're high school, I should say, middle school, probably not, is the transcript. This transcript has been developed by Meta, and the reason I say that is because it is customizable. Not every single thing in PowerSchool can be customized, but this is something that our team created a few years back. And so what you see is what's been determined in part by Meta Solutions, PowerSchool team, but also by your district leaders to determine what should show here and what should not. So that is what our training environment transcript looks like. Yours might look a little bit different. So if you are curious on why it looks that way or have questions or maybe requests or suggestions, talk to your district leader about a different way you'd like this information to display. Or maybe, I've seen this happen in some districts, maybe you don't acknowledge class rank anymore. So you'd want that taken off. That can be taken off. Maybe you need a separate line for financial literacy here in the credit summary. That's happened a lot more in the last couple of years, understandably. So we've added that to most of our districts now. Maybe you don't want to show the grade scale. Maybe you'd rather have different information down here. Just as some examples. Questions about student screens. Actually, I'm going to go back to Barrel here. Couple of customizations at the bottom of the agenda I want to touch on really quickly. So I talked about the student line already. We talked about the multi-select tool at the beginning. I thought that was a better place to start. What I also wanted to show you is the special ed count and available course enrollment details. So the way to find that, I'm going to show you where to find it and then explain what we're looking at here. When I go to courses and programs and I go to the modify course schedule screen for a student, there's information that you might not know exists that could be helpful for your planning when you're changing student schedules, or if you just in general need the information. There's not a great report yet created out there where I could just go get all the information in one fell swoop. But if I wanted to know how many special ed students are in a specific section of a class, I could come here to the modify course schedule for any student, and I could search it by period number or by course number. So I'm going to start with period here. And again, I'm not changing the student schedule. I'm just using this page to find information. There is a customization called special ed and modify count that shows you how many special ed students are in a section of a course. We had this request a couple of years back. Somewhat felt like they would find this very useful. And so that's what you're seeing the results of. So out of 16 students, 4 of them are identified special ed per the state of Ohio with a disability. If I want more information, I can click into the hyperlinked enrollment, and this is a different customization. And this one is the available course enrollment. It shows me what their disability is for that student who has it, who was identified that way, I should say, and any student programs they're in. Now, these are all scheduling student programs that our students have been identified with in this train environment. You may be seeing something different. So again, 2 different customizations here that you may be able to utilize: special ed count and available course enrollment information. Shows you their identified disability and any special programs, student programs they're in. Questions on those? If you want those customizations, talk to your district leader. They're the ones that can get those for you. If they need help, they can put in a case. Lastly, I'm going to end by going back to the start screen, and I'm going to show you the quick search setup. I've created several stored searches. Again, there's a whole PowerHour on how to create these and what they do. But there's a few of these that I felt I would use more often than others. So there's now a customization where I can go to my stored searches and I can include it in the quick search bar. So this is the customization right here, this checkbox. And now that I've done that, I have my newer high school students or students who have enrolled into it after a certain date. See how it made them my selection? 51 students are automatically my selection to do whatever I need to with them. Or maybe I want students who don't have a schedule, who have no classes on their schedule. And there's my 42 students who have no classes on their schedule for some reason. So maybe it's August 1st and I need to schedule my new students. That's how I'd find them. Again, these are codes that I set up in stored searches, and then I use that customization to add them here. And very lastly here, the schedule search is a customization that will allow you to find students with gaps in their schedules, holes in their schedules. So from a scheduling standpoint, I highly recommend this one. It does take some playing around. I'm not going to take the time to go through examples with this one, but I would recommend getting this customization and toying around with it and seeing in making sure that you can find the students who, again, like maybe it's August 15th and your student is, and you want to know who does not have a third period course. Well, you could find that. Right. I am going to pop that survey in the, I know I went a little bit long. I thought I could, thought I might, not that I wanted to, but there was a lot to cover here. Hopefully you've all taken something away from this. I did put that survey in the chat, and I would really, really appreciate you filling that out. It's just a 5-question, a quick one, just to let us know how we're doing, and let us know how we can improve this training for the future. Again, this is our first time around with the helpful screens for school counselors, and we'd really appreciate your feedback. So thank you so much for coming.